October 6, 1875. A single decree leaves Constantinople and the world stunned. Grand Vizier Mahmud Nadim Pasha announces that the Ottoman Empire, a superpower that once ruled from Vienna to Yemen, can no longer pay its debts. The numbers are jaw-dropping. 214 million British pounds owed, against an annual income of just 21 million. That's a debt burden nearly 10 times higher than its revenue. For context, today's United States sits at about 7.8 to 1. Within months, the crisis spirals. Sultan Abdulaziz is overthrown in a midnight coup, found days later with his wrists slashed. His nephew takes the throne, only to mentally collapse 3 months later. A second nephew steps in as the empire quickly loses territory, control, and dignity. The default of 1875 didn't just trigger a financial disaster, it dismantled an empire and handed its tax revenues to European powers for the next 40 years. Welcome to the Wealth Timeline, where we uncover how money, power, and history intersect to shape our world. Today's story is about how a single financial decision didn't just bankrupt a nation, it opened the door for foreign powers to take control of the Ottoman state from the inside. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire functioned without foreign loans. It funded itself through taxation, land revenues, and tribute from conquered regions. Borrowing from outsiders was seen as beneath the dignity of a global empire, but by the 1800s things were falling apart. Greece won independence. Egypt gained autonomy. Serbia and Montenegro pushed back. The empire that once terrified Europe now struggled to hold its own provinces together. The Tanzimat reforms, an attempt to modernize everything from the military to the legal system, required huge amounts of cash. Schools, railroads, telegraphs, ministries, all expensive. And with a weak tax system and European powers circling like sharks, the Ottomans turned to foreign loans. Once they did, there was no turning back. The breaking point came with the Crimean War. When Russia invaded Ottoman territories in 1853, Britain and France stepped in to help. The war was brutal and costly, and for the first time, the Ottomans borrowed money from European bankers to stay afloat. Their first foreign loan, £3 million at 4% interest. It set a dangerous precedent. From 1855 to 1875, the Ottomans borrowed almost every year. But instead of investing in infrastructure or industry, the money went to wars, palaces, and a navy the Sultan hoped would rival Britain's. The loans came with punishing terms, high interest, heavy commissions. And worst of all, European banks demanded collateral, Ottoman customs revenues, salt taxes, even tribute payments from Egypt. If the Ottomans defaulted, Europe got paid anyway. By 1873, the trap snapped shut. In 1873, a bank collapse in New York triggered the Panic of 1873, a global recession that froze credit markets worldwide. Suddenly, the Ottomans couldn't borrow anymore. And because they had been borrowing new loans just to pay old interest, the entire system came crashing down. Natural disasters made things even worse. Drought in 1873, floods in 1874, failed harvests, famine. Tax revenues collapsed, the very taxes the Ottomans had pledged to European creditors. By 1875, they owed £200 million, nearly 10 times their annual income. Interest payments alone consumed more than half of all government revenue. With no options left, Mahmud Nadim Pasha suspended half of all interest payments. Europe exploded in outrage. 6 months later, the empire extended the suspension to almost all foreign debts. The Ottoman Empire was bankrupt, and bankruptcy came with consequences. Sultan Abdulaziz never saw the coup coming. He had begun his reign with optimism, traveling to Europe, promoting modernization and building one of the world's largest navies. But his spending habits were catastrophic. As the economy crumbled, he became the target of intellectuals and military officers who wanted constitutional reform. On May 30th, 1826, Abdulaziz was removed without resistance. He was taken to Faria Palace under house arrest. 6 days later, he was found dead. The official story claimed suicide. Most historians doubt it. Either way, his death marked the collapse of the old order. But the chaos continued. His successor, Murad V, suffered a psychological breakdown and lasted only 3 months before being replaced by Abdulhamid II. Europe sensed weakness. The Balkans erupted. Russia invaded in 1877. The empire suffered devastating defeats. The Ottoman state was crumbling on all fronts, military, political, and financial. By 1878, the empire had lost vast territories, including Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania, and large parts of the Balkans. But the most humiliating blow came not on a battlefield, but in a boardroom. In 1881, the Decree of Muharrem created the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, a foreign-run institution controlled by European creditors. This wasn't oversight, it was occupation by spreadsheet. A council of European representatives took direct control of salt and tobacco monopolies, stamp and alcohol taxes, fishing revenues, silk taxes, customs duties from Istanbul, and even tribute payments from the Balkans. At its height, the OPDA controlled about 1/3 of Ottoman state revenue. It employed more officials than the Ottoman Ministry of Finance itself. It was a state within a state, a foreign tax-collecting empire operating inside the Ottoman Empire, and it remained in place until 1928. Turkey paid the last Ottoman debt installment in 1954, 100 years after that first loan. Was this exploitation or enforcement? Some historians argue that European banks deliberately designed predatory loans to entrap the Ottomans and seize control of their resources. Others argue the OPDA enforced accountability that the Ottoman government had failed to maintain. Either way, the result was the same. For nearly half a century, the Ottomans didn't control their own finances. The pattern is familiar: Egypt in the 1870s, China after the Boxer indemnity, Greece in the 2010s, Argentina multiple times. When a country borrows money it can't repay, it risks surrendering more than money. It risks surrendering sovereignty. So what can we learn from the Ottoman debt crisis? First, debt is power. Borrowing from stronger nations gives them leverage over you. Second, consumption disguised as investment is a slow-moving disaster. Third, financial control can be more effective than military conquest. The Ottoman Empire didn't collapse because of a single war or a single leader. It collapsed because it mortgaged its future, failed to invest in its own growth, and let outsiders control its resources. By the time the Young Turks took power in 1908, the empire was a shadow of itself. And by the time Turkey paid off the last Ottoman debt in 1954, the world it once dominated had completely disappeared. Because in the story of wealth and power, history never ends. It just changes hands. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden chapter of history, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the Wealth Timeline, and hit the bell icon. The next story might just challenge everything you thought you knew about power.